my name is Wendy Lennon. I am a member of the Innovation Advisory Team, and I'm going to be monitoring the time today and monitoring the chat. The session is also going to be recorded for future use. So without further ado, I would like to let the presenters go ahead with pursuing external grants at Ferris, Matchmaking 101. And I'm not sure who's going to start. There's is Tom Dowling, are you going to go ahead?
Yes, I'll go. Yes, I'll get started. Thank you, Wendy.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thanks everyone for joining. This session is titled "Pursuing External Grants at Ferris" and Matchmaking 101, and we have a group of folks, gosh, an A team of individuals here that came together for a particular grant application that we thought we could highlight some of the dynamics around putting together a grant writing team that maybe could serve as a blueprint for others going forward. And the list of folks here on the slide, we'll probably introduce everyone as we go along here, and each of the individuals' roles, I guess, in the orchestra of putting this all together. So everyone had a really critical piece of the grant application. But one of the things that we wanted to start out with, just to highlight the role of the Office of Research and Sponsored Programs in how we can help in kind of the matchmaking process that matches up an idea for a project, whether it's bringing together people with a certain interest area or expertise. They want to come together to create a project that might be fundable by an outside entity. And so there's a matchmaking process that kind of happens there between the initial meeting with the faculty or staff, and then matching that up with the funding agency that might have some money available to put toward the project. And so that side of it, Wendy Stapp is really the grants administrator that is capable of doing that kind of funding search based on keywords and interests and things like that. And so that's kind of an early step in the process that Wendy is really good at in terms of searching certain databases and things to look for funding opportunities. And Wendy, are you on the call here?
Yes, I am, Tom.
Okay. Wendy, do you want to go ahead and just talk a little bit about the funding search process that you go through to help try to find some funding opportunities?
One of my outlets is the Grant Research or Resource Center, and that's where I input a lot of information. I also get emails quite regularly from them, letting me know the deadlines and some projects. If I see something I think will interest somebody, then I typically send them the package and wait for them to say they're ready to go. And yeah, it's pretty much what I do. And I also help with the budget. We put the budgets together, and I've lately been helping with budget justifications. So that's
great.
about it.
Yeah, that's so helpful to learn about that process. And this slide kind of lays out what Wendy just mentioned as far as bringing that initial project idea to us, the Office of Research and Sponsored Programs. We often have a kind of a sit down meeting or Zoom meeting with a faculty or staff that's interested in trying to find some funding. Wendy kind of collects all the keywords for that interest area, does her searching through the GRC database and things, and then helps then once we find a funding source, we're able to then bring that funding opportunity that might be published as like an RFA, like there might be a instruction manual that's posted on a website, for example. We then take that and say, all right, this looks like it's something that could be consistent with your project. Now let's look, literally line by line through this RFA just to make sure that we're eligible for applying for that funding. Okay. So that's still some upfront stuff that we do just to vet it out, to make sure, we're eligible, we have the right expertise, that there's allowable costs that would fit with what you want to do. And then if at that point, everything, is looking like a go, then we'll actually sit down and start to put the team together. And sometimes sometimes it's literally just one faculty member that might have a specific research interest, in biotechnology or, drug discovery and chemistry, where it's literally just their lab, their research, and they're going to write for a 3-year research grant to design new drugs. That's one type of grant application. The other might be like an institution-based grant, where there might be a team of people coming together to address a specific problem or a need across campus. And so the example that we wanted to kind of lay out here today, and walk through some of those steps, was actually an institutional-based grant that became available in early 2020. It was an RFA put out by the U.S. Department of Agriculture, and the title was the Distance Learning and Telemedicine Grant Program, or DLT. It had a really short window of opportunity. It got published. The RFA got published, I think, in February 2020, with a deadline of April 12th, I believe. And so we had a couple different options to try to apply for this. It hit the radar screen in first kind of in the opioid group, the space of folks that were working in the implementation grant side of things. And it was decided that they probably weren't ready for the telemedicine component quite yet. But then Deedee Stakley, who was involved in many of the early discussions around kind of the distance learning and dual enrollment piece, what caught her eye there, and I'll turn it over to Deedee here to kind of go through her thought process on this, was that there was a requirement for STEM education, particularly with a dual enrollment focus with high school students in rural environments, that then kind of resonated, and then that kind of took on a new focus, and then a whole new group of folks listed on the right hand side of the slide here, to come in and start to come into a circle and talk through what that might look like. So Deedee, do you want to talk a little bit about how that then started from your side of it?
Yeah, so this was an exciting time, right? We were just going on remote work because of COVID, and this team came together and really put this grant together within about 2 weeks, right? And so a grant of this size in 2 weeks, without all of the pre-work that Tom and Wendy did to prepare us and to set up a system in SharePoint where we could really utilize the system to share information, to track data, to begin writing the grant, that would have been we would not have been set up for success the way that we were without that piece on the front side. Pulling together the right people to write a grant was an interesting process. We didn't know this was the first grant that this team had written together. We didn't know how we would work together and what would be each of our strengths. The fact that we all came from such different backgrounds and brought different skills to the table is really what made this committee work, this grant writing team work. In addition to writing this grant, we wrote 4 grants within a number of months with this team. And so I'm very, very pleased to be able to work with them. And, there's another one coming down the pike that I'll share with them after today. But truly having, the process that we used was really to look at what the issue was, right? Writing the grant. And then we broke it apart in chunks. And so everybody contributed. We really worked well, where it didn't feel so overwhelming to think, oh my gosh, we have this huge grant to write. because each of us took a part and then we critiqued each other and we, really brought out each other's strengths.
That's great. Do we want to maybe just quickly run through the list of folks here that were
Yes.
part of that team? So Professor Herrington from the ISI side of things, that really became the core of the STEM education component of this, that tied in with the dual enrollment. Andrew Peterson from the instruction technology side with the virtual virtual reality side. Tracy, Dr. Russo with her the instruction technology side with the online courses that design and I learned so much about VR through this process. I didn't even know it really existed. So and everyone's going to have a chance to talk here too in a minute. Angie with her organizational skills and putting things together, and her experience in college readiness, and of course, Allie Konieczny with her expertise in keeping everyone on task, and her excellent ability to put things into words that really just catalyzed the whole thing coming together. And so that's kind of the general overview of the team that came together. But one of the things that maybe we could spend a little time talking about is one of the critical steps in almost like a go, no go, like when you have a team of people like coming together to put together a set of goals for a project. If you don't have real good, clear agreement on the goals of the project, then it's probably going to be difficult going forward to really finish writing the grant, because this really serves as the blueprint. The goals and objectives serves as the blueprint that everything else is written around, including the budget and everything like that. So the project goals came together really with the whole group come together and agree on these. And I don't know if anybody wants to share kind of that process of how kind of some iteration back and forth about goals and how decisions were kind of made around what was the important parts of what the grant would cover.
I can jump in on some of this because I think it was really fascinating to be a part of this team as well as other teams. And one of the key parts that Deedee had referenced earlier was just the ability to share and break apart the pieces, because some of this project came right out of work that Hira, Dr. Herrington, had started with the Ferris VR Now project. And time-wise, because of the courses he was teaching in some of his areas, he had limited time to be with us, however, as far as some of the grant writing. However, he had shared his vision before, and Andrew and I had already, we chugged that Kool-Aid. We were like high on that Kool-Aid with the VR. But so we shared that vision. And so, as Tom said, he learned about immersive VR, that shared vision part where writing, truly listening to what the goal is, and like Tom said, that shared agreement. So regardless of any personal feelings one way or another, or personal knowledge even, it's just trusting that team and writing to do whatever you can to support each other for those, those common goals. And it was another area that kind of fleshed out with this when we started. I think we were looking, Deedee initially was looking with some of the partnerships that she had, more directly around the Big Rapids area. We've had a longer, we'd written some earlier grants. She's written a lot, done a lot with the dual enrollment. But that word rural in the distance, that was one thing I brought up because I live an hour north of campus and have primarily lived in rural environments for most of my adult life, and know that, intimately there's this discrepancy in access. So we ended up, I raised that question, then we just broadened this. But again, that came just from sharing. So I brought up that concern, and then this team, because they're awesome, they said, okay. And we added that in. And I think every single team member had input on where it went, but not one of us is responsible. Like, I can't say anything is mine. It's all ours, 100% ours.
And if I can just jump in, what was really interesting to me about this project, the timing of it, the fact that we were going virtual right then. And so some of us working from home, it kind of was changing our work environment already. And so Deedee jumped right on that, booked hours at a time, just big chunks, so that if we could get together, we could get together and work on this. And then with creating these project goals, we were all kind of living that rural experience. Like, how do we have connectivity? How do we make sure that we can connect to the things that we need to do to advance our work? So we were kind of living the experience of the people we were trying to serve with this grant, which I thought was great. It also would take us on bunny trails at times. And that's where Tom was really great at taking us back to the grant purpose. So as we're creating these project goals, he kept refocusing us on the grant purpose. Like, you know, oh, it would be great to train teachers to do this and have this training model. And he'd be like, nope, it's only for such and such. And so then that would help refocus us again.
I agree. I think that, you know, what Tracy describes and Angie describes really were, you know, some of the key parts of our success. You know, I went into this knowing that there were certain schools I wanted to partner with. And as Tracy said, we ended up expanding, and we didn't end up saying, okay, well, we only want to do 7 schools, so we have to pick which 7. We decided, okay, then we're going to expand and have 20 partners who were rural and who met that poverty index as well. So really doing that research and narrowing down our focus as far as which rural partners, I think had a huge part in us being able to do what we wanted to do, and knowing that the areas that we were reaching, we really were focused on creating access for students who might otherwise not see Ferris as an option for them to go to college, whether it's in high school, whether in high school or after high school.
One of the things I thought
bit-
was pretty incredible, like probably nothing like I've ever seen before, would be the ability that Deedee and team was able to identify partners very, very quickly that wanted to be, like, once those objectives were set, everybody wanted, you know, it's almost like the partners, yes, we want to be involved in this. And it just can't, and that list on the screen here, that's 23, these 23 partners, did we have letters from every one of, we had letters from every one of these partners included in the application? Probably, you know,
We had letters from many of them, as well as from, you know, community organizations like MCAN, Michigan College Access Network, and LCAN. And so we involved community agencies as well.
Well, getting the letters, that just raised even that other part related to the communities that we designed this grant for, and what Angie talked about, we were living this, because I remember, you know, with Manton Consolidated Schools, you know, I reached out. Part of the ways I got a hold of him, because the schools are closed, got a hold of him via Facebook, but it was actually a learning experience, because on the letters, you have to get those electronic signatures and they have to be turned around in time. And we didn't have things set up in DocuSign or any of that. So then even figuring out how to get, Deedee had sample letters, figuring out how to get them edited, revised, and actually signed all electronically, all remote, with all these partner schools. And depending on where the school was and what resources they had, it right there described the challenges that we were helping and hoping to address for all the students in this area.
And emphasizes how we pulled on each other's skills and resources and relationships, right? You know, each of us were able to pull on our relationships that we have with different partners or different communities to pull together this list.
Yeah, I think that was just so compelling. Just this application that we put together. Just I think the USDA was very impressed with how these rural partners came together. We had one of the components of this type of grant through USDA is that you need to reach out to the state representative for USDA. So that was Jason Allen, who's a former U.S. Congress, I believe, for Michigan. but is now the USDA state rep. But we needed a letter of support there, and President Eisler was very helpful in making that connection for us and making sure we had that letter. But I think Mr. Allen was very, very impressed with how this project was coming together, and it was very helpful to have that support. I don't remember. Was this VR classroom video? Was that something we wanted to share today, or was this kind of just a snapshot of this?
I think that's just a show off of the VR environments that we're talking about. You can kind of see it just from the still here. I think that was just a walkthrough of Flight 135.
Actually,
I
if
think
you
it's
wouldn't
just
mind
2
sharing
minutes
it,
if we wanted to show it.
yeah,
Yeah,
Tom,
it's
if
quick.
you wouldn't mind clicking on Flight 135, it will actually play it because having not experienced VR, this was really helpful for me to see what the capabilities were of the virtual environments.
For some reason, when I clicked on it, it wouldn't play. Does someone else want to try to share that? The video itself?
The video, well, maybe Allie, if you can access it and share your screen, or someone, the video was created, that was part of the original Ferris Now grant that Hira and his students, and I think Mary Holmes supervised them along with Andrew. So it was, I believe, 10 students that created all the VR, we call them the VR assets in the room, so that it would resemble as closely as possible an actual classroom on Ferris. And Hira, you might have something to add to that.
That's exactly correct. The goal here was previously classes we've held in virtual reality were done at commercial sites with pre-made classrooms that had been offered by those sites. And we thought what we really wanted to do to give students a Ferris experience was to have them experience some of the Ferris classrooms in virtual reality. If they can get that working, what you're going to see is a walkthrough that had been done by the digital animation and game design people with Andrew's help and Mary Holmes' help that demonstrated what they were capable of doing as students for creating this room. You won't be able to get the full experience because you won't have a headset on that allows you to feel like you're physically in the room at the moment. But that's what we were trying to capture with this. And we went on to do other rooms as well, but this is one that we're using. And previous to this, we had run several courses in virtual reality, either in part or in whole, using commercial sites, and essentially allowing us to capture the essence of a face-to-face course, being in a classroom with a professor, with other students, seeing the presentations, being able to do all of that, but remotely using an immersive technology, which is virtual reality.
It was fun working with those students to go, see this room right here? Make this. And they're like, you mean everything? And you go, yeah, everything. They're like, the chair and the podium and the buttons and the everything. And you go, yeah, everything. Make this room.
Markers on the whiteboard so they would throw them because they didn't believe they could really move them.
Well, it was really fun when we started talking about the grant really focused on STEM dual enrollment through distance education. So we could have took the easy way out, right, and said, well, we'll do this through Zoom, or we'll just do online classes, those type of things. But we really wanted to create that immersive environment, something that was different and unique that could set Ferris apart. And so working with Hira and Andrew and Tracy, who were more familiar with the VR, that's how we landed on doing virtual reality as the mode to which we will offer STEM dual enrollment to these 20 rural partners to really put the students in the class or bring the students to campus virtually.
Yeah, one of the kind of expanded goals of that first one, that first smaller grant, was that a student should be able to walk around this virtual environment and feel like they are on campus. This should have the exact same look and feel as if they are walking into Flight 135.
Yeah, I know that we included links to some of the VR rooms for another grant that we had done. And I thought that was really useful because you never know who your grant reviewers are going to be. And if they really have any idea of how good these VR environments are, even without having a headset, it's truly remarkable to me, the environments that are being created through students and through the ISI program. Just really remarkable.
One of the key things that I've always heard that grant reviewers do is they say, is this group able to pull this off? And by having that kind of pre-work done by Hira and kind of those students, it's like, oh, look, they've already got all of this stuff that they've already done in VR. This is just the next level of that for them. So sure, yeah, we'll fund that.
And we were able to use this grant, the grant writing process that we used here with the VR as our focus for a second grant that we applied for, the same group, but a second grant that we applied for and received as well that really supports the work that we're doing now with the USDA grant.
Yeah, just like so it's all the parts came together here, you know, like just the expertise of the people at the table and the prior work that was done and the academic, you know, work and literature searching behind that had to be laid out. You know, Dr. Russo and Allie and Deedee just putting together literally the compelling story around the, you know, the rationale for doing things this way was just really it was cool. I kind of geeked out on all the background literature. It was really cool. A little bit about the application process, not to kind of bore people with details, but one of the things that worked with really well for us was creating a SharePoint site that literally had all the components of this federal grant, which generally the federal grants can be somewhat monotonous, trying to figure out, you know, what's actually being requested here. You know, what does this worksheet mean? You know, is that required? Does it have to be the exact same format? So Wendy and I were able to really kind of map out, kind of come up with a blueprint of each of the parts of the grant that needed to be done. And then, you know, what does each component need to have in it? You know, are there page limits? Is this a 1-page max? You know, and sometimes if it's a 1 page, if it goes over that 1 page, it could actually make you ineligible for the whole grant. It'll put you in a separate category. You won't get funded. So we were able to really kind of navigate that RFA really kind of line by line and come up with a SharePoint site that housed each of those components. This is kind of a screenshot of the final PDFs of each of those sections there. But we did kind of break that down into, I think someone mentioned it earlier, like, you know, it's a huge undertaking, but you break it into smaller pieces. And that's kind of how it worked. And we were able to kind of divvy up, you know, who would be responsible for each of the sections and some deadlines and things like that. So I don't know if anybody wanted to reflect on kind of how that worked.
I was going to say, Tom, there were a number of things in the way that structure just functions super well because, you know, like looking at that collaboration chart, for example, some of those sections, you know, and all of us bopped in and out of them at different times, but Tom had them so you could easily find where you're looking for. But we also had a couple of samples from other grants. And when there were times where we were maybe working on something that we really didn't know, you know, what the grant speak language was, we would literally put what the successful grant had up on the screen and start writing ours almost in parallel, you know, basically patterning ours right off of what worked and then cross-referencing it, you know, with these lists to make sure, you know, every I was dotted, the T's were crossed. And it was that back-end organization. It was, again, this is like a massive dissertation that all of us got done in 2 weeks. That would be the best equivalent. The big, you know, our master's thesis or a huge project. And so having that structure in place all the time, that was where you always could go back to and just know that, okay, you're on the right track. You can get it done. Just do this. Just follow directions.
Well, I think as Angie said, one of the first things that we did when we pulled the team together was we blocked 2 hours every morning, Monday through Friday, to get started on this. And there were days that as a team, we might have been together for the 2 hours, but then the separate groups would start meeting, right? And so we might be, you might have two people meeting in the evening, Allie and Tracy focused on a certain area, or Angie and I might have worked on something, or Hira and Andrew. And so we really started breaking it apart in chunks. So we had this block of time that kind of gave us some grounding in a time that was quite turbulent with going on remote work in the pandemic.
Yeah, I would say during that transition to the kind of pandemic world, this was probably the most consistent thing on my calendar for a good 2-3 weeks.
Mhm.
And none of us worked, all of us have worked with different people for different reasons, but none of us worked with everybody all together before. This was actually, it was a team pulled together for the purpose of this grant. And in that time, because of the need for the project and how well structured, Deedee setting out that time, we very quickly formed a team of trust, but we had never worked together, on anything small even together before we started this process.
And that team of trust was really key, right? To us being able to work together and to pull this work off this quickly. We all wrote and then we all critiqued, and we had to trust that no one was really throwing digs or saying, oh, that is awful. It was really that we were coming together and critiquing this to get this final outcome.
And jokingly, we started calling our group Ferris E. Grant Harmony. And so, I'm old enough that I think of the Love Connection and Chuck Woolery. And so I kind of thought of Tom as our own Chuck Woolery for making those connections, because Tom's really the one who said, you might not be familiar with this person, but I think they'll be a good fit for this reason. So Tom was our Chuck Woolery for what we termed Ferris E. Grant Harmony.
Yeah, we had a lot of fun along the way. I mean, I think it was hard work. It was every once in a while reality check of, all right, now we're down to 1 week, and why don't we pull up this document and literally go line by line. We had all eyes on, and I don't think we've had one quite that that worked that well since then. I mean, this was literally everybody was on board with sitting down and putting all eyes on literally every line of this grant application.
I think part of that too, though, was that we didn't over detail it. Like you could just, and I think that time constraint forced us to go, good enough. We're at 90% here. We don't need to debate some stuff. We can just kind of proceed. We didn't, because I've been in other groups where everything is, I don't want to critique and be like micro detailed and focused, but you go, with having that deadline, you're like, it's gonna be handed in, and we're on form number 12 now, and we've got to get up to form number 20. So let's get moving. There was definitely, I don't know whose role that was, but there seemed to be a constant push to be like, okay, good, let's keep moving.
Yeah.
Well, and
Another part with that circles back to having that belief in the shared vision, because especially that last week, I mean, the reality was we'd be sitting there at the end of the morning meeting, and it's like, okay, so who's working all night tonight pretty much to get it done kind of thing, because it was that tight time frame. And I think that just highlighted, the trust each of us had in each other, that it was worth it, that we could build on somebody else's writing, whatever, critique it in safety. But I think it also highlights the purpose of Hatched, even sharing the innovative ideas, because going back to this time frame, the whole world just tanked, and us in our different spheres of influences, we're looking around like, Ferris needs to do something, and we need to do something right now, and we need to get this done so that we've got a positive path forward for our students, our region, our institution. And so I think that also that passionate belief that as an institution, this work is important was also, part of the team Kool-Aid.
And I remember Allie showing up like some mornings with just whole new blocks of text that she wrote that night. And so it's like all of a sudden you come back and you're like, that was blank yesterday. Look at, yay.
Well,
Well-written blocks of text, not rambling, well-written, concise blocks.
So that was something great about SharePoint is, you could see who else was in the document. And so I recall being up like at 1 a.m. working on it. And then I saw Deedee show up and, so Deedee's like, what are you doing up? And I'm like, well, I feel composy right now. So I'm working. So, but keeping us on task, Tom had showed the checklist earlier. That checklist to me was really helpful, because we'd have a due date and it just felt so good to actually be able to say, check, this part is done. So really those small manageable chunks, having the SharePoint in the small manageable chunks and having that check sheet really, besides, the great team dynamics and, knowing that this was a really worthy effort to really help push us forward.
Being able to highlight some of those chunks as well. It's like, okay, that one's done. And we would highlight it and keep seeing how close we could get that check sheet to being completely highlighted or which one we could color in the next day.
I mean, there was a lot of data that had to be pulled too around, different grants require, some data to be pulled on, partners and things that you want to bring in. But, I can't remember who it was that had to go back and look at like each of the zones, each of the counties that each of these partners, where they existed. You had to kind of pull some data on like economic, poverty levels and things like that. And that was a big piece of it too.
Yeah, I think Deedee did some of that, but I also wanted to mention, since you brought that up, Tom, Wendy's been very quiet, and I think some of that might be who she is, but I want to say throughout this process at any given time, when you talk about pulling data and explaining, and then maybe even sometimes where we needed the data kind of explained to us how it answered whatever question the grant wanted, anytime we reached out to Wendy, she dug deep, whatever data, nailed it down, was right back with us, took whatever time we needed so that we could put it where it belonged. And so anyone, considering writing a grant, what Tom and Wendy did, they had two different roles that they played, and they played them so well. We could not have done it without either one of them.
One of the things that, that you don't necessarily, that you think about when you're writing a grant, but that wasn't any of our grant writing team's expertise was the budget. And so for Wendy to create that budget template for us to show us, what information needed to be included, we could pull the information and put numbers in. And then Wendy worked her magic to put the formulas in to make sure that we were calculating everything correctly. And then to even go back through the narrative for the budget as well. That was a huge help.
Some of that
I just feel that this team was a well-oiled machine. For not working together in the past, y'all came together and it just really flowed. I mean, it was beautiful working with you guys.
And now you're stuck with this group.
That's fine with me.
I think some of the budget too was some of the building off of the previous stuff, because we did have a lot of the prices and the details and the items already spec'd out just from the esports grant that we had received previously. So it was like, hey, how do you digitize a person and put them online? And it's like, here's the computers and the cameras and the green screens and everything that you need, and then just scale it up. And so a vast chunk of like the detail work in the budget, I should say not this or the detail, because that was Wendy, but the shopping list, I guess, was already done.
Andrew, how much do batteries cost, by the way?
A lot, especially when you buy them for 22 different schools for a 3-year for rechargeable. Yeah, I'm going to shut up now.
There were wild budget items in there is all I've got to say. It was interesting.
Well, a lot of that went kind of back to the detail is we wanted our partners not to have to spend anything. So we're like, okay, they might need another wireless access point. We don't want them to have to buy AA batteries for the handsets. This grant was really, really focused on hardware. And so we're like, there is no hardware that a partner entity should be able to have to buy on their own for this grant.
The other side of the grant that we've not talked about very much as far as what the outcomes of the grant, right? One is the technology, and that was the large part, but the other is the training. And that goes hands in hands with the equipment that we're providing for these 20 rural partners, as well as for the additional hubs on campus. I don't know, Tracy, if you'd like to talk a little bit about what that training piece will look like, because we're just getting started now looking at the training and getting ready to start ordering equipment.
So I'd kind of like to jump in there too while she's muted. Haha.
You were quicker.
Was that one of the frustrating things that I found with this grant was that it was so hardware. Like there were so many times where we're like, oh, it'd really help if we had a grant coordinator or a training component that we could do here. And it's like, Tom would just be like, nope, not in the grant. Can't do it. Nope. Sorry. Because even the training that was allowed in the grant was specifically worded that we couldn't provide it. And it was like, come on, that's what we do.
Can you go to I think it's on the next slide, maybe? I had added a slide showing the Canvas. Oh, maybe it's the next one. Yeah, there it is. So one of the things that we can do is create the learning materials in Canvas. So we can train some of the faculty how to use it. And bottom line, Angie is going to be coordinating directly with the different dual enrollment schools. Angie and I will be collaboratively working, fleshing out this professional development resource course in Canvas. The items in there are ones that I've pulled from all the research that goes way back to starting with Hira's group. And even yesterday in our planning meeting for this, Hira shared that he had just talked in VR. He was talking with someone else, and I can't remember where this other person was from, but bottom line, they were describing the training they did in a new strategy that they found to be much more effective than one Hira and I had gone through. So that second line item, the module that I'll be building out with Hira's help, is, how does your current course work in VR? Because what they were finding is it worked better if they would just move their course straight into VR, and from there they would see what was wrong and what needed to be tweaked, and then back it up by training them. But this resource, by having it in Canvas and having it can be replicated, it can be used, we can put it in Canvas Commons. So any of our dual enrollment schools, anybody interested in learning how to teach in VR, they'll be able to use these resources and become part of this, again, a larger community, so that hopefully this ripple effect will of not only, VR, but good teaching in VR, good teaching in general will, go out and spread in our area and hopefully well beyond.
One of the things that, how this does tie in with all of the work, for instance, that we're doing right now with the enrollment buckets and Spark, right, is that this grant will increase enrollment for dual enrollment. We will be able to provide STEM dual enrollment opportunities through VR by utilizing the equipment that we're able to purchase with this grant and put in our rural high school or rural ISD/tech centers. So the grant will support the enrollment growth at Ferris as well. And that's a big piece of why this grant was so important.
Well, just a couple things then, just to kind of to close things a little bit here. We obviously got the notice of grant award from the USDA. That was really exciting, and it set off some interesting things. Like, so the media got involved. We had local media interested, and the congressional district offices, kind of posted the news on this, because I think we were the only one in the state of Michigan to receive this grant. And so it got some attention, some interviews. I think, Deedee, were you interviewed maybe by some of the media?
Yeah, Andrew and I did several interviews as a part of this.
So that's kind of some fun stuff that happens once you get a big grant like this.
We
So
also had to invite a lot of the news crew to come in and try it. And obviously because of pandemic, we weren't able to, but we're like, come back when we've got this all set up and put on a headset. And that kind of goes back to, Hira's, original kind of mantra of you can't explain some VR to someone. You're like, picture it. It's like real. You go, well, duh, everything is. But to actually put on the headset, it makes a huge difference in your perception of it. Yeah, Tracy's modeling. This is how we were playing mini putt-putt golf yesterday during our professional development informal series.
Innovative collaboration space.
Yes, that was the words we used.
Tracy's our Vanna.
Yeah, so then
It's what it looks like, and it's so cool because it comes, it's just a case, and literally it's also functions as a fully functioning computer, or you could sit back and watch Netflix in a really cool living room. But
so that's one of the major things that we've been focusing on is these are now standalone things. Even a year ago, they had to plug into a $3,000 computer and have these towers set up and all this stuff, and that's gone away. And so now it's kind of plug and play. So we budgeted for 700 of those things to go around to all sorts of schools in Western Michigan.
What's interesting is we're also getting, so this grant focuses very specifically on rural partners with certain poverty levels so that we can make a difference and really create access and equality, right, for students to have access to Ferris. But what we are finding is that some of our other secondary partners who don't meet that criteria are interested in, are talking about getting headsets and being able to offer classes in the same format with Ferris. So we see where it could grow to other partners who are purchasing the equipment.
I don't think we've talked about too much about the Ferris hubs either. So as much as we're expanding this out to our partners, we're also creating 3 spaces on the Ferris campus for faculty to specifically come and experience the technology, build out digital assets, and to kind of have that physical VR home on campus.
And with some other grants that Deedee's already working with, we're hoping that it opens up opportunities for internships for Ferris students as well as we keep creating VR assets.
Yeah, it was great to have them tie together.
Yeah, Jim put in the chat about the equitable access, and that's another, it's not about the rural. It's really interesting, even things like, for example, with this headset that we got, I'm at that age, I use reading glasses most of the time for the computer. I've got reading glasses everywhere. It's so annoying. With VR, you don't need that. There's a lot of controls actually in the headset, and because the person owns it, it can control for pretty much a lot of the disabilities, even things like it has voice controls. So you don't have to type, or anything like that. So there's a lot of other, even with disabilities, and you create your avatar. You are who you want to be on some of that. And again, it's not perfect because I don't think that anything in life is perfect to make everything 100% equitable, but it addresses so many of those types of, issues and concerns.
It really does. And I appreciate that you brought that up as well in your comment, Jim. From the equality and the access piece, we're looking at how can we utilize this type of technology with students who have cognitive disabilities, right? To provide them to put them on equal playing fields with their fellow students at Ferris and with students across the world, right? So that's going to be another piece that we're focused on, is working with students with cognitive disabilities or learning disabilities to help them to be, to have that level playing field.
And right before this presentation, I went to the one that was on Dr. Kitamari and Dr. Stutzel and Dr. Kavanaugh did, and about diversity. And it's interesting because Hira is the one who, every time he comes to one of our meetings, he's been talking to some people in some other country somewhere. When you're in VR, the limitations even of the culture and the people that we have here, which is great. I totally enjoy living where I live, but I love visiting other places. And so all of a sudden you're connecting with them, but you're connecting with them on an interest level, so it's not a forced connection. It's you wind up in the same place because you like the same things. So that's part of building those connections just across, whether it's international cultures or even just different geographic regions or different colors, different races, different, the whole genders. It's fascinating when you get started in it.
See, and this is how this whole grant team worked, is we would just start talking and then it would go and it would lead, and occasionally we'd write stuff down. And then after 3 weeks, we hit submit. And I look at like some of the opportunities that we have here to like do the next level of grant. The amount of data that these headsets can collect and record, we should be able to go as granular as eye focus and pupil tracking. So we know what students are looking at during class. We can find out that after 13 minutes, students aren't looking at your PowerPoint presentation anymore. Like the level of granularity and the detail that's happening in this virtual environment is going to have a whole new round of data collection and analysis.
And Andrew and I actually have a meeting with a faculty member who is getting ready to or is pursuing their doctoral degree about the possibility of research, in VR with this grant. And so we're excited to be able to hopefully expand the research opportunities there as well.
And we are on the front.
Thank you all of you for the great information. I hate to cut you short, but I think you maybe want to leave a little time for Q&A, some questions here before the next session starts popping in. There's some great comments in the chat as well. Kudos to you, great information. So we'll leave it open for questions at this point.
I had a quick question. Well, obviously wonderful, incredible work from everyone. We learned a lot of lessons here for future grants, and really the collegial atmosphere of this team is really great. I also have another question about the internship, the internal side of things for our students. This is obviously building the assets, building the VR. Is this giving opportunities for students, for example, from ISYS to build things for the project, or is this already built? How's that helping on that front?
So I think we definitely have opportunities, and I know Hira can speak to this as well as any of our teammates, but part of the value is being able to provide those internship opportunities to work with us to build those environments, because we know that those environments will support not only the dual enrollment opportunities, but to get students to campus for a campus visit or for an orientation in those areas as well. So we definitely are excited about the opportunity to work with interns in whatever capacity will help meet their requirements as well as for the goal of the grant.
I think one of the challenges with this grant was that it was so hardware specific. And that, so what we found, or at least whether we did it, I don't know if it was by design or not, but we basically wrote a lot of smaller, like, $5,000, $10,000 grants specifically for internships. So here we've got this wonderful big grant that's a lot of hardware. And now it's just a matter of backfilling. Yeah. Hey, Kat says hi.
In fact, Mohammed, that Flight 135 you looked at was done by students whose internships had essentially been lost due to COVID, and we picked them up and ran with them in order to make sure that they stayed on track with their degrees and were able to continue to move forward. So for our students, this represents a lot of possibilities, not only for internships, but for being able to be participating in research as well.
Wonderful, wonderful, really.
And so the next grant, when we need to code a game engine in a 3D environment, we'll make sure that there's more people budget line items.
The practice on these devices itself is really a great opportunity for students as well. Can we just a quick idea on the courses, the training for these students to be more prepared, something like that? I don't know if there's time for that question, Hira and Andrew.
We have maybe 1 minute.
Going to depend upon where they want to fit in.
Right.
we have students from essentially a number of disciplines that participate in this. So it can be anything from information systems, information security, digital animation, digital graphics. There's places for all of those different types of students in this environment. So at this point, I would say that we would be entertaining a wide range of disciplines to assist us with this.
Yeah, definitely. If anyone has questions or ideas after, please don't hesitate to email any one of us that worked on the grant. We'd love to talk to you and hear your thoughts.
Thanks, Deedee. Thanks, Tom, Tracy, Hira,
Thank you
Angela.
so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Ellie, all of you. Thanks so much.
Thanks,
Great
Wendy.
work.
Bye.